The predator pup hit the floor like a meteor. One moment, the containment gate was sealed and humming with blue energy. The next, the emergency locks flashed red and the enclosure dropped open with a metallic scream. Everyone in Lecture Hall G9 jolted to their feet as a blur of muscle, claws, and bioluminescent stripes launched itself across the polished tiles. Someone screamed. Someone else dove under a desk. Professor Vecrolon, 6 limbs, armored chitin, and usually unshakable, made a sound like a dying air filter. The predator pup was small only by its species standards. Knee-high to a human, perhaps, but already powerful enough to tear through steel mesh. Its elongated jaws snapped open, glowing fangs reflecting the overhead lights, its frill expanded to full warning display. The creature's pupils were twin razor-thin slits of fury and fear. And it wasn't leaping at random. It was leaping at the human. Cadet Mira Hayes stood near the front row, a datapad still in her hand, head tilted in a way that suggested she hadn't fully processed what was happening yet. Her classmates were already scattering in every direction, scrambling over seats, leaving trails of dropped styluses and datapads. But Mira didn't move. The predator pup soared toward her in a perfect arc. Vecrolon shrieked. "Cadet Hayes, move! Move! Move!" But Mira didn't run. She didn't flinch. Instead, she slowly extended her hand. Palm open. Fingers relaxed. Shoulders loose. And she whispered, so softly it barely carried past the third row. "Easy." The pup's momentum should have knocked her flat, but something in the way Mira held her stance, feet grounded, posture centered, made the creature shift midair. It landed hard in front of her instead of on her, claws screeching against the tile as it skidded to a stop inches from her boots. The frill snapped wider. Its chest expanded in a deep, threatening, rumbling growl. The closest students ducked behind the professor. Mira crouched, slowly, deliberately, bringing herself down to the creature's height. She didn't break eye contact. Didn't escalate. Didn't radiate an ounce of fear. The creature's growl wavered. Mira lowered her hand until it was only a breath away from the pup's muzzle. "It's okay," she murmured, her voice so steady it almost felt unreal in the chaos around her. "You're scared. I get it." The bioluminescent stripes along its back pulsed, no longer in frantic, bright warning red but softening into a nervous amber. A hush fell over the room. Professor Vecrolon shook visibly. "Cadet Hayes, do not touch that animal." But Mira did. Just 2 fingertips. A light brush against the creature's snout. The predator pup froze. Then its frill slowly folded down. Its pupils widened. It pressed its nose against her palm. The entire hall gasped. And somewhere in the back row, a student whispered the only thing anyone could think. "Humans are terrifying." The predator pup's breathing slowed, each inhale less frantic than the last. Mira kept her hand exactly where it was, steady, gentle, unthreatening. Her fingers barely moved, tracing the faint contours of the creature's muzzle with feather-light precision. Around them, the lecture hall remained frozen in stunned silence. Chairs lay overturned, a backpack had burst open and scattered its contents across the floor, and several students remained half-crouched behind Professor Vecrolon, who looked like he might shed his exoskeleton out of stress. The pup gave a short, uncertain chirr. It was a strangely delicate sound coming from something equipped with claws capable of piercing bulkhead plating. Its frill fluttered once, then settled flat against its neck. Mira smiled softly. "There you are," she whispered. "Not so scary when someone sees you, huh?" The professor's mandibles clicked anxiously. "Cadet Hayes, please step away, slowly, carefully, but immediately. That animal is highly unstable. It has already bypassed Class 3 containment protocols." Mira didn't look away from the creature. "It's not unstable. It's overwhelmed," she said quietly. "You brought it into a room full of strangers, bright lights, and loud machinery. Anyone would freak out." A brave student peered out from behind a desk. But it tried to kill you." "No," Mira said. "It was trying to get away from the alarms. I just happened to be in the direction it bolted." The pup's bioluminescent patterns pulsed again, still amber, still calming. Mira slowly rotated her wrist and let it sniff the underside of her hand, then the back. The creature leaned closer, nostrils flaring as it took in her scent. Professor Vecrelon shook his head violently. This is preposterous. Razorback neonates do not imprint on anything except their own clutch, not without intensive bioconditioning. They do not seek comfort. They do not respond to. He gestured helplessly. That. Mira chuckled under her breath. Predators are predators, she said. Fear is fear. Doesn't matter what planet you're born on. The creature's tail swept once across the tiles, then again, slower. It nudged Myra's knee with the top of its head. She laughed softly, brushing the fur just behind its jawline. From the back row, another student whispered, "This shouldn't be possible." Mira rose to her feet, keeping her hand on the creature's head so it wouldn't panic. The pup rose with her, posture low and uncertain but no longer aggressive. Professor Vecrelon's voice cracked. "Cadet Hayes, what are you?" Mira blinked, genuinely confused by the question. "Human?" "No," the professor said shakily. "Not like the ones in our records." A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Fear, curiosity, disbelief. Mira stepped forward, the pup glued to her side like a terrified child clinging to a parent. The room tensed as one. "It's okay," Mira told them gently. "He's staying with me because he trusts me." "Why?" someone squeaked. Mira scratched the pup under the chin. It closed its eyes, relaxing into her touch as if it had never known anything safer. "Because," she said softly, "he knows I won't hurt him." A silence so deep it seemed to absorb the light settled over the hall. And for the first time, the students wondered if the stories about ancient humans, about their instincts, their presence, their impossible bond with predators, hadn't been exaggerations after all. The predator pup pressed even closer to Mira as the overhead lights dimmed back to normal levels. Without the emergency strobe stinging its eyes, its breathing eased further, each exhale warm against Myra's leg. She kept her movements slow, deliberate, letting her presence stay steady, predictable, something the creature could anchor to. Professor Vecrelon finally found enough stability to stand upright again, though his mandibles still trembled. "See, Cadet Hayes, this level of interaction violates every containment guideline in the syllabus. For your own safety, you must disengage from the specimen." Mira ran her hand down the pup's neck, carefully avoiding the bioluminescent spines. "If I pull away too fast, it might panic again," she said calmly. "He needs consistency right now. Not sudden changes." "He?" Vecrelon repeated faintly. "You have determined its gender?" "He's vibrating with a masculine resonance," Mira answered casually. "Same thing Earth animals do when they're nervous but not aggressive." The professor stared at her like she had just spoken in forbidden runes. "Cadet Hayes," he said slowly, "I don't believe you understand the implications of what is happening." Mira only shrugged. "It's not implications. It's just animal handling." A student 2 rows up, raised a shaking hand. "Ma'am, how are you so calm? That thing could kill half of us in, what, a few seconds?" "Probably," Mira admitted. "Probably?" She offered a tiny shrug, as if she were discussing classroom seating arrangements instead of a creature classified as a planetary hazard. "Fear just makes animals more afraid," she said simply. "They smell it, they mirror it, and then everybody spirals." She scratched the pup's jawline again. He leaned into her palm with a low, needy rumble. "This little guy doesn't want to fight. He wants someone to tell him he's safe." Gasps followed the word safe as if it were some ancient spell. From the far right of the hall, a reptilian cadet whispered, "Is this genuine Deathworlder ability? I thought those were myths. Stories professors told us as children." Professor Vecrelon's posture stiffened. "They were myths," he snapped. "The only records of human interaction with apex predators come from 6,000-year-old fragments. Nothing contemporary suggests their species still." He stopped. Because Mira had turned slightly, and the pup followed her every micro-movement with unwavering loyalty. Its frill stayed down. Its eyes softened. It nudged her hand when she paused petting, letting out a soft, trembling chirr that sent shivers across the room. Vecrolon swallowed. Still possessed those traits. Mira looked around the hall then, really looked. Dozens of alien cadets stared back at her with expressions ranging from awe to disbelief to the kind of fear reserved for creatures that don't fit neatly into the natural order. She raised both hands slowly, palms outward, showing the room she wasn't hiding anything. "Look," she said. "I didn't come here to scare anyone. I'm just doing what any human would do." A silence fell so complete it almost hummed. One student whispered, barely audible, "Then humans were even more terrifying than the legends." The predator pup nudged Mira's hip, demanding attention again. She rubbed its ears gently. "Not terrifying," she corrected softly. "Just good with scared animals." The class exchanged uneasy glances. Because to them, this wasn't good with animals. This was something older. Something instinctive. Something that shouldn't be possible anymore. Something they had thought died with the extinction of Deathworlders. The predator pup's tail thumped once, just once, against the floor. The sound echoed through the hall like a seismic event. Every cadet flinched. Mira didn't. Instead, she crouched beside him, fingers brushing the fur just above his jawline. His breathing shifted immediately, slowing into a steady rhythm that rippled beneath her palm. Professor Vecrolon stared at her, as though she'd sprouted a second head. "Cadet Hayes, you must realize this is not normal. No documented species, not even our own behavioral specialists, can calm a juvenile Kelran predator mid-lunge." Mira smiled. "On Earth we called that Tuesday." A ripple of nervous laughter fluttered across the hall, brittle and uncertain. The professor clicked his mandibles sharply. "This is no joking matter. The Kelran young do not form attachments. They do not respond to soothing vocalizations. They do not." He gestured helplessly. "Cuddle." But the pup had, in fact, pressed itself against Mira's knees and was currently trying to curl its claws around her boot as though she were some kind of anchor. Mira shrugged. He was scared. Scared babies do this everywhere. "Baby?" a student croaked from the third row. "That thing is the size of a full-grown Orvani tracker. That doesn't mean he's not a baby," Mira replied gently. "Size doesn't determine emotional development." The room fell silent again. This time it wasn't fear, more like a collective, unnerved curiosity. Mira lifted the pup's chin, checking his pupils. The creature allowed it, unresisting, even leaning into the touch. His bioluminescent spines dimmed to a soft, bluish glow. Something the cadets had never seen before. Whispers rose like wind through distant reeds. "My archive says that color indicates imprinting." No, imprinting only happens between Kelran siblings. Or parents. Are we sure humans are extinction classified? Mira pretended not to hear that last one. Professor Vecrolon took a cautious step closer. "Cadet Hayes, may I attempt an approach?" "For scientific purposes." "Sure," she said. "Just don't look him in the eyes too long. And keep your shoulders low." The professor hesitated. "Why shoulders?" "Predators read it as dominance." He instantly dropped his shoulders by a full hand span. Mira bit back a grin. The pup watched Vecrolon with mild suspicion but didn't tense. The professor's voice trembled. "Fascinating. Truly fascinating." He extended a trembling hand, stopping a safe distance away. "If I may," the pup growled. Softly, but unmistakably. Vecrolon froze. Mira placed her hand gently on the pup's flank. Easy. He's just curious." The growl evaporated. The creature's muscles unclenched beneath her fingers. A collective gasp shivered across the room. It was the kind of moment that rewrote biological assumptions. That forced entire disciplines to reconsider themselves. That made academies change textbooks. Professor Vecrolon exhaled shakily. "Cadet Hayes, I must ask for recorded documentation. Have you been trained in xenological calming protocols?" "Nope." Are you using a neuroempathic implant? Nope. Are you, in any way, biologically modified? Mira snorted. No. I just grew up around animals. The professor stared. The students stared. Even the pup looked up at her, as if she had just claimed the sun as a pet. Mira raised both hands innocently. What? You all act like this is magic. Professor Vecralon whispered, horrified. In some cultures, it is. The pup yawned, a wide, terrifying display of serrated ivory crescents, yet somehow the gesture looked almost bashful as it nudged its snout against Mira's arm, as though asking whether it was truly allowed to stay by her side in this vast, echoing hall full of strangers who smelled like metal, ozone, and fear. The cadets collectively leaned backward in their seats, some gripping their desks so tightly their joints whitened, while others hovered their hands near the emergency signal pads in case the creature's display was a prelude to an attack. But Mira simply scratched the soft patch of fur beneath his jaw and watched him fold into her touch like a creature who had been waiting his entire life for someone to finally understand him. Professor Vecralon paced in a slow, wide arc behind them, one hand pressed to his temple as though wrestling with a lifetime of academic certainty that had just dissolved into smoke. His crest rippled with agitation. This contradicts every behavioral compendium we have, he murmured, pacing faster with each pass. Kelran juveniles do not tolerate unfamiliar scents, yet he is resting against you. They do not respond to vocal cues, yet he obeys your tone. They do not, under any circumstance, exhibit voluntary vulnerability in the presence of larger species. He's just tired, Mira said softly, shrugging as though she hadn't just undone centuries of xenobiological research by casually existing. And overstimulated. Lots of noise, lots of lights, too many eyes. Anyone would get overwhelmed. The professor stopped pacing. Slowly, he lifted his gaze to her. Cadet Hayes, you are not anyone. The room stiffened. A few students exchanged glances, half awe and half suspicion, as if they feared the implication hidden behind the professor's words. Mira felt the familiar pressure of scrutiny settle over her, a weight she despised, the same one she had felt since arriving at the Interstellar Academy, the weight of being the lone human in a place that had rewritten her species into little more than a dusty footnote of galactic history. Mira stroked the pup's flank. I think you're all giving me too much credit. Impossible, whispered one of the Orvani cadets, her crystalline voice trembling. No other species can calm a Kelran. Not without chemical sedation. Not without risk of death. The pup shifted again, rolling halfway onto his back, exposing his massive ribcage, meant for crushing, not cuddling, and letting out a small, contented huff. The entire hall recoiled as one. Mira didn't flinch. Instead, she pressed one hand to the pup's chest, feeling his heartbeat slow from a wild gallop to a gentle thrum. Sometimes, she said, her voice deep and steady, beings only need someone to see them as more than their instincts. Professor Vecralon stepped forward at last, his trembling hands clasped behind him. Cadet Hayes, this is no longer simply an anomaly. It may, he swallowed, throat plates clicking. It may be evidence of something long theorized but never verified. Mira looked up at him, brows raised. Which is? That humanity, he whispered, voice reverent and frightened all at once, was never just another species of Deathworlder, but something far more unprecedented. Something the galaxy has quietly feared ever since your extinction was declared. The room seemed to contract around them, silence thick and electric. The pup nuzzled Mira's hand again. She smiled. And the professor whispered, Humans were not dangerous because they survived death worlds. They survived death worlds because they could tame them. A low hum trembled through the training hall as the cadets processed the professor's words, their disbelief melting into something quieter, wariness, awe, and the first flicker of curiosity. The pup shifted again, pressing closer to Mira's legs, his powerful tail thumping once against the metal flooring with a dull, resonant clang that made several students jump. Mira didn't react. She simply rested her palm along the pup's spine and felt the tension ripple out of him in slow waves, like a storm breaking. Professor Veckerland's crest dimmed from alarm red to contemplative blue as he stepped closer. For centuries, he began, voice steadier now. Scholars believed humans were wiped out because of their reckless boldness, because they ventured into biomes so hostile they defied classification. But the archival discrepancies, the behavioral records of species you encountered, the legends. He exhaled sharply. Perhaps it was never recklessness at all. Perhaps it was compatibility. Mira looked down at the pup, whose eyes were half-lidded in contentment. Compatibility, she echoed with a small, amused huff. That's a generous way of saying they cling to me like a security blanket. The professor ignored the joke. Young Kelleran do not form imprint bonds. They form survival bonds. They attach only to what they perceive as the safest entity in the vicinity. Which, given the circumstances, he gestured at her with open bewilderment, should not be you. A ripple of whispers traveled through the hall. A Terex cadet, slender, shimmering, and twice Mira's height, leaned forward with wide, glowing eyes. Is it true? Are humans really empathic apex species? Able to synchronize with predators? Mira shook her head. I don't know what humans used to be. I only know what I am. But even as she said it, she felt the flaw. Because what she was, what she had always been, never fit cleanly with the Academy's expectations. She'd been told she was too intuitive, too fearless, too quick to step into the space where a dangerous creature was thrashing or pacing or snarling. Advisors said it was a flaw. Trainers said it was recklessness. Counselors said it was trauma. Yet the pup beside her, muscles like coiled steel, jaws built to sheer bone, saw her not as prey, not as threat, but as safety. Mira's pulse tightened in her throat. Maybe the professor was right. The moment broke as the hall doors slid open with a hydraulic hiss, and a squad of armored handlers strode in, helmets down, shock lances raised, boots thudding in perfect synchrony. Their presence strained the air like a vacuum. Several cadets flinched. The pup froze, instincts snapping back to the surface in an instant. His ears lowered. A rumble built in his chest. Mira's fingers closed around his scruff. Hey, easy, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper yet clear enough to cut through the room's mounting tension. Stay with me. The rumble wavered, then softened. But the handlers did not. The lead officer pointed a gloved finger at Mira. Step away from the Kelleran juvenile. Now. Professor Veckerland stiffened. Officer Jorik, that will not be necessary. The cadet has established a... Sir? Jorik snapped. That creature is classified as a Tier 7 risk. If it decides to snap that cadet in half, we will not reach her in time. Mira slowly rose, keeping her hand on the pup's shoulder so he wouldn't panic. Her voice remained calm, even gentle. He's not a threat. That remains to be seen. Jorik growled. Move. The pup growled back, low, warning, protective. The entire room tensed. Mira, whispered one of the cadets. Don't move too fast. But Mira didn't step away. Instead, she knelt beside the pup, placed both hands on either side of his massive head, and spoke with a quiet certainty that halted even the armored squad in their tracks. Easy, buddy, she whispered. They're just scared. Stay with me. Focus on me. The pup's growl melted like ice under sunlight. Something impossible settled into the air. And every being present felt it, that Mira Hayes wasn't commanding him. She was anchoring him. The handlers hesitated, caught between protocol and the unmistakable shift in the room's atmosphere. The pup, this genetically perfect apex, engineered to intimidate even armored security staff, had relaxed under Mira's touch with a visible, undeniable trust. His paws, each large enough to wrap around her forearm, loosened their tension. His breath, once a rapid staccato of instinctive fear and protective instinct, steadied into deep, rhythmic waves that Mira felt reverberate through the floor. Officer Jorik's visor angled down, processing the scene with visible discomfort. That shouldn't be happening, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. He tightened his grip on his lance as if physical certainty could override the evidence in front of him. Kelran juveniles do not bond. They do not obey. They do not soothe. Professor Vecralon stepped forward with a slow, deliberate motion, crest shifting into a thoughtful lavender. Officer, I must insist you lower your weapon. This is not a containment breach. This is a behavioral anomaly of significant scientific value, and potentially a historical revelation. Mira didn't look up. She kept her hands on the pup, steady and warm, fingers brushing the thicker fur at the base of his jaw, an instinctive comfort gesture she didn't think about until she saw the way it melted the last remaining tension from his frame. The pup leaned into her, pressing his weight into her side with the hesitant, hopeful vulnerability of a creature and used to gentleness. He's scared, Mira said quietly. He's not dangerous. Not like this. One of the cadets, Ryla, a soft-voiced Avasian with feathered limbs, stepped forward, eyes shining. Is it empathy? She whispered. Some kind of resonance? Humans had legends about that, did they not? Creatures drawn to them? Mira shook her head. We didn't have magic. Just patience. And instincts that made sense to us. But they don't make sense, Professor Vecralon countered gently, to species that evolved with danger defined in broader, harsher terms. You are calm in the presence of a predator. That is not patience. That is something deeper. Officer Jorik's posture stiffened. All of this is fascinating, he snapped, but we still need to remove the juvenile from the hall. Regulations demand. At that moment, the pup lifted his head and, softly, hesitantly, nudged his muzzle against Mira's chest. The movement was so gentle for such a powerful animal that several cadets gasped. The sound he made afterward was even more astonishing, a low, thrumming trill that vibrated through the metal floor like a purr made for a much larger creature. Mira's smile grew. See? He's calm. He is imprinted, the professor corrected, awe dripping from every syllable. This is unprecedented. We are not witnessing calm. We are witnessing devotion. Jorik's hand hovered over the trigger of his lance. He did not fire, but his uncertainty carved hard lines across his stance. Devotion can turn into aggression, he argued, though his voice lacked the conviction it carried minutes earlier. One wrong move. Mira finally looked up at him. And something in her gaze, steady, human, unshaken, made him falter. I'm the wrong move, she said softly. If he were going to hurt anyone, it would have happened the moment he grabbed my sleeve. But he didn't. He asked for help. And I heard him. The pup nudged her again, pressing his forehead into her hand as if sealing her point. Professor Vecralon exhaled, crest flaring with dawning certainty. Officer Jorik, he said, your squad may remain on standby, but lower the lances. You are escalating a situation that the human cadet has already resolved. Jorik hesitated, but even he could see the reality before him. Slowly, reluctantly, he lowered his weapon. Around the room, cadets leaned forward, breath held, as if watching history reshape itself in real time. Mira stroked the pup's head one more time. Good boy, she whispered. And the predator, engineered for fear, raised for intimidation, prepared for violence, closed his eyes with a soft, contented sigh. The tension in the hall eased in increments, small exhales, shifting postures, the soft clatter of a cadet finally unclenching a pen he'd been holding like a weapon. But beneath that release ran a deeper current, something heavier, something the entire room felt without knowing how to articulate. The pup had chosen Mira. Not out of instinctive hierarchy. Not out of fear. Not out of conditioning. But out of something far rarer, something that carried the weight of lost eras and vanished species. He had chosen her because she felt safe. Mira stayed kneeling beside him, sensing the subtle changes in his breathing, the tiny twitches in his ears as he oriented himself to the now softened room. Her hand moved in slow, deliberate strokes along the ridge of his spine. She didn't rush him. She didn't try to stand. She didn't try to prove a point. She simply existed beside him with a patience that felt older than anything the Academy had ever taught. Professor Vecralon moved closer, careful not to intrude. His crest glowed a thoughtful mauve. "Cadet Hayes," he murmured, "I must ask you something unusual." He paused, choosing his words with academic precision. "Do you feel anything? A resonance? A pull?" Humans were widely theorized to possess empathic intuition, but empirical evidence has always been limited. Mira tilted her head, considering the question. "I don't know if it's intuition," she said after a moment. "It's more like noticing what he's trying not to show." His breathing was too shallow. His ears were twitching toward the vents, loud fan noise. The lights overhead were too bright, and he was trying to track everything at once. She glanced down at the pup as he pressed into her leg again. He wasn't angry. He was overwhelmed. A murmur spread through the cadets. Overwhelmed by cold, sterile lights and echoing metal and strangers staring like judges. It made sense, yet none of them had recognized it until she said it aloud. The professor's pupils widened. "You identified all of that in seconds." Mira shrugged faintly. "It's just paying attention. Humans used to do that all the time." Jorik scoffed under his breath. "We pay attention. We're trained to." Mira looked up at him again, not with defiance, but with simple honesty. "You pay attention to threats, not to fears." That struck him deeper than she meant it to, and for a moment his jaw clenched as if he were trying to process words that cut closer to truth than comfort. He looked away, visor tilting downward. The pup shifted suddenly, lifting his head and sweeping his gaze across the handlers. His muscles tensed, not with aggression, but with wariness born from pattern recognition. The armor, the lances, the posture. Mira's hand moved instantly to the spot behind his jaw, the place she had noticed calmed him fastest. "Hey! Don't worry about them." The pup's shoulders dropped a fraction, enough to be noticeable. The professor's voice trembled with awe. "Fascinating. He responds to tonal modulation. He responds to trust," Mira corrected softly. Just then, one of the cadets, Taro, small and timid, scales glittering with anxiety, took a tentative step forward. "See, can we approach?" he asked, wringing his hands. The pup's eyes snapped to him, pupils narrowing. A warning rumble started deep in his chest. Mira felt it instantly. She placed a steadying hand on the pup's chest. "Easy, boy. It's okay. He's not going to touch you. Just look." The rumble softened. Taro froze in place, nodding gratefully, not daring to come closer. Professor Vecralon exhaled. "Remarkable. His aggression curve is responsive only to your intervention. A symbiotic behavioral tether," Jorik muttered. "More like a biological gamble we shouldn't be taking." The professor shot him a sharp glance. "Your caution is noted. But this is no longer a containment issue. This is a discovery." Mira stroked the pup again, feeling his heartbeat, strong, steady, slower now. She didn't know why she felt such a fierce need to protect him. Maybe it was because everyone else saw danger first. Maybe it was because she saw something else. Something lost. Something familiar. She leaned in, whispering, "I've got you, okay?" The pup breathed out a warm, heavy sigh and rested his massive head against her knee. And across the hall, every cadet, every professor, every armored guard, felt the ground shift beneath their assumptions. This wasn't just unusual. It was impossible. It was history waking up. A quiet settled over the hall, not the brittle silence of fear but the dense, heavy quiet that follows revelation. The cadets watched with wide eyes, some leaning so far over their desks that their harnesses creaked. Even the handlers, rigid armored, trained to suppress reaction, seemed frozen in a rare moment of uncertainty. Nothing in their manuals prepared them for a predator pup choosing comfort over instinct, choosing a human over every safeguard bred into its genes. Mira could feel the shift too. It pressed in around her, a weight made not of danger but of meaning. She kept her hand moving in slow arcs along the pup's fur, feeling the subtle vibrations beneath her palm. He wasn't asleep, not entirely. His breathing still carried small, wary pauses at every mechanical hiss of the ventilation system, every distant clang echoing from the corridor. But he stayed grounded through her touch, leaning into her like she was something familiar in a world of cold steel and unfamiliar faces. Professor Vecrelon approached with reverent care, as though fearing a thoughtless footstep might break whatever fragile bridge existed between Mira and the creature. "Cadet Hayes," he said, voice lowered to a gentle hush. "I believe the significance of this event extends beyond behavioral anomaly. We are witnessing a connection once attributed to myth." His crest fluttered in slow, rippling gradients. The ancient records spoke of humans who soothed beasts others found untamable, who walked into dens and emerged with companions instead of scars. We dismissed it as poetic metaphor. He gestured toward Mira and the pup. But it appears the metaphors were warnings we failed to heed. Mira gave a quiet, unsure laugh. "I don't think I'm a legend." The professor's eyes glowed softly. "Legends rarely do." Before she could respond, the pup shifted again, this time glancing not toward the handlers, nor the cadets, but toward the upper balcony where the observation panel shimmered faintly. A silhouette moved behind it. Someone had been watching. Someone with authority enough to observe unseen. The shadow stepped forward as the transparency faded. Dean Heros Solari. Tall, composed, his silver mantle draped like liquid metal over his shoulders. His expression unreadable. The room straightened instantly. Even Jorik snapped to rigid attention. Heros descended the steps with slow, measured confidence, boots clicking softly against the polished incline. He approached the circle of space around Mira and the pup, stopping just close enough for the air to hum with unspoken tension. His voice, when it came, was low and resonant. "Cadet Hayes." Mira swallowed. "Sir." He studied her, the pup, the handlers, the trembling air between all of them. "Do you understand what you have done?" He asked, not accusing, not praising, simply asking a question with weight enough to crack stone. Mira hesitated. "I didn't do anything. I just helped him calm down." Heros's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in deep, calculating thought. "For 10 generations," he said slowly, "our understanding of apex predators, of imprint dynamics, of survival instincts, has shaped our training protocols and our interspecies policies. But this," he gestured to the pup now pressed comfortably against Mira's side, "this overturns all of it." The pup lifted his head, gaze fixed on the dean with unwavering intensity. Not hostile. Not fearful. Assessing. Heros held its stare without flinching. "He trusts her." Professor Vecrelon nodded. "It appears so, Dean." "No," Heros corrected softly. "Not appears. He does." Around them, whispers stirred like dry leaves. Cadets grasped the enormity of what the dean implied. Trust between human and predator wasn't coincidence. It was precedent. Or worse, or better, heritage. Heros turned to Mira. "You will come with me after this session. There is more to discuss than this hall can contain." The pup rumbled warningly, leaning closer to Mira. Heros lifted a hand, not in threat, but acknowledgement. "Peace, youngster. She will not be taken from you." The pup's ears flicked. His rumble eased. Mira exhaled slowly, tension unfurling in her chest. She didn't know where this was heading, but she could feel it spiraling into something vast. Something that touched on old stories of humanity no one believed anymore, stories of survival not through strength, but through connection. She scratched the pup behind the ear, steadying him, steadying herself. "Whatever's next," she murmured, "we'll figure it out." The pup pressed his forehead to her knee, sealing the promise she didn't know she had made. The lecture hall hummed with an almost sacred tension as Mira remained kneeling beside the pup, her fingers moving in slow, precise arcs along its fur. Even the metallic echoes of distant corridors seemed to shrink into irrelevance, as though the room itself acknowledged the fragile bond forming between human and predator. Cadets whispered behind their desks, careful not to break the moment, eyes wide as they absorbed the reality that something thought extinct, or perhaps never truly understood, had just reasserted itself. Dean Harris Solari remained a silent observer, his silver cloak catching the light like liquid metal as he stepped closer to the duo. His gaze was sharp, analytical, but beneath it lingered awe, a rare acknowledgement in a man who had long been schooled in skepticism. "Cadet Hayes," he said, voice resonant yet controlled, "you've demonstrated behavior that contradicts every protocol in interspecies handling, every field guide, every containment guideline. And yet, you stand unharmed." Mira straightened slightly, still keeping her hand on the pup's shoulder. "I'm not special," she murmured. "I just notice things most people ignore. Most species, humans included, don't pay attention to fear until it becomes aggression. I noticed him before he had to show it." The pup shifted, leaning fully into her side, his bioluminescent stripes dimming to a soft, rhythmic pulse that seemed to echo the calm in her breath. The cadet's murmurs became hesitant questions, almost reverent. One of the younger Terex cadets, wings trembling, whispered, "Sir, this is impossible. Apex predators don't attach like this. They're designed to kill or flee." Heraus raised a hand, silencing the whispers with the kind of presence that had earned him authority across multiple star systems. "Observe, but do not interfere," he said. "We are witnessing something beyond our textbooks. Humanity has always been underestimated." Professor Vecrolan's crest rippled slowly, a sign of his contemplative state. "Dean, if this is indeed a human-predator bond, it isn't just rare, it's evolutionary. Behavioral, social, something that has shaped history in ways we have dismissed." He gestured to Mira. "This cadet may exemplify the traits our archives implied but could never empirically confirm." Mira felt the weight of countless eyes on her but did not flinch. She looked down at the pup, whose massive head now rested fully against her knee. "He's not dangerous," she said softly, almost to herself. "He's just looking for someone to trust. That's all." Heraus exhaled, a slow, deliberate sound that carried more than curiosity. "Centuries of speculation, cadet. Extinction, survival, myth, and yet here you are, living proof." His gaze swept over the room. "Record everything. Every nuance, every behavior. This is history in motion." The pup lifted his head slightly, eyes scanning the observers but returning immediately to Mira. The dean's words hung in the air, heavier than any manual or regulation. He stepped back, giving them space, and Mira felt a subtle pressure in the hall lift, as if the collective disbelief was absorbing into something new, respect, perhaps even understanding. Mira's voice was calm, unwavering. "I didn't save him. I just paid attention." The pup leaned against her leg once more, tail brushing the metal floor in a gentle thump. The rhythmic pulse of his bioluminescence seemed to harmonize with the energy in the hall, creating a silent resonance that none of the cadets would forget. The doors of Lecture Hall G9 remained open, but no one dared move. The pup's massive head rested lightly against Mira's knee, his breaths long and even, a striking contrast to the chaos that had erupted mere minutes ago. Cadets slowly leaned forward in their seats, realizing that the creature's instincts had not been broken, only redirected. It wasn't submission. It was trust. Dean Heraus Solari stepped forward, his voice carrying the rare mix of authority and quiet reverence. "Cadet Hayes, you have done what centuries of training, conditioning, and containment protocols could not. You have established a bond with a predator that should never recognize kindness from a species it is genetically programmed to fear or challenge." Mira kept her hand on the pup's shoulder, fingers tracing the faint ridges of muscle beneath its fur. "I didn't do anything special," she said softly. "I just noticed what he needed. He wasn't attacking. He was scared. Just like any creature would be." The professor, Vecrolan, let out a long, slow sigh, crest fading from worried red to contemplative lavender. "No recorded human has exhibited this level of synchronicity with apex predators. Not even in the myths, and certainly not in the modern archives." His mandibles clicked nervously. This changes everything. Behavioral models, containment protocols, even interspecies trust dynamics. All of it may require reevaluation. The pup shifted slightly, pressing fully against Mira's leg now, tail brushing softly against her boot. Its eyes, once narrow and warning, were wide and calm, glowing faintly in the dimmed lecture hall lights. Mira whispered, "You're safe. No one's going to hurt you." Jorik, the lead officer, lowered his lance fully and took a step back, visibly unsettled. I've never seen anything like this," he admitted, voice low. "Every instinct told me to intervene. And yet, nothing happened. He just trusts you." Mira smiled faintly, almost to herself. "That's all it takes. Trust. Consistency. Patience. Fear only escalates fear." Hayes observed in silence for a long moment. Then, finally, he said, "Cadet Hayes, the implications of what you have done cannot be overstated. You have demonstrated that humans, once thought extinct or insignificant, possess abilities we dismissed as legend. Perhaps our archives were wrong. Perhaps humanity never truly needed to dominate death worlds, because it could survive them in ways we have yet to comprehend." The pup nudged Mira's hand, pressing its massive muzzle against her palm in a gesture that seemed to seal the hall's revelation. Mira chuckled softly, brushing behind its ear. "We'll figure it out," she murmured. "Together." The cadets exchanged glances, awe and disbelief mingling in their expressions. They had witnessed history, the revival of an old myth, the redefinition of human potential, and the undeniable bond between a girl and a predator. The room hummed with a new understanding, a quiet, electrifying recognition that some instincts were not only alive but extraordinary. Professor Veckerland shook his head slowly, words almost lost in disbelief. "It seems we underestimated humanity." Mira rose to her feet, the pup at her side, and looked around the lecture hall. Every eye was on her, not in fear but in awe. She exhaled, feeling the subtle weight of responsibility settling onto her shoulders. She had not just calmed a predator. She had reminded the galaxy that humanity, though thought extinct, was far from powerless. And as she walked toward the doors, pup faithfully at her side, Dean Hayes Solari followed quietly. "Cadet Hayes," he said softly, "the galaxy may need your kind more than anyone realizes." The pup's tail thumped once against the floor, a steady, resounding heartbeat that echoed the truth of the moment. And for the first time in centuries, humans were no longer merely a footnote in galactic history, they were its pulse.